Hi there. Hi, my name is Bob Boross, and this is my YouTube jazz dance channel. This is my jazz and tap dance life. And we're here talking about jazz dance, and in particular in musical theater dance, and different ways that musical theater dance is now being seen on Broadway. We've had the traditional way of seeing the Fosse style, the Jerome Robbins style, the real snazzy jazzy style, but there are new ways of looking at how Broadway dance is evolving and what's out there and what the opportunities are and even what it was in the past, but maybe it's just not known because of that really Fosse-esque type of look that we kind of associate with musical theater dance. So today I'm going to be interviewing Darryl Clark, who is a professor at Southern Illinois University, and he's going to be talking about his beginnings in modern dance, his training, and how he uses modern dance training in training dancers for musical theater and in terms of choreography. So we have him waiting here. I'm going to bring him in, and here he is. Hello, Darryl.
Hi, Bob. How are you? Hello, everybody.
Oh, I'm doing fine. Thanks for agreeing to be on here and to talk about modern dance. And I was happy to meet you and find you because there aren't a lot of people who are developing and working that deeply in modern dance in relation to musical theater. So why don't we'll get this started. Why don't you talk a little bit about like, what is your training? What is your modern dance training and how are you using that now in your current position at Southern Illinois University?
Fantastic. Thank you for having me, by the way, and making me and
Sure.
letting me be a part of the conversation. So, my training began in 1981 at Columbia College Chicago. The dance department at that time was under the direction of Shirley Mordine, whose background was a combination of Martha Graham and Murray Lewis. And in addition to that, her company was the faculty. There were a couple of company members that had studied with Kelly Holt, so they knew Hawkins technique. There was a woman who had graduated from the University of Utah, so her background was Limon and Bill Evans and Laban. And then there were a couple of people who were a hybrid of dancers, of dance techniques. And so my training began there, and my first classes were Hawkins, and I didn't understand them because they were so unstylized and so pure, and they were a little frightening. And at the time, I thought because dancing is supposed to be about leaping and jumping and throwing your legs up high, that just to be asked to run or walk backwards was something I really was. It put me way off. So I didn't get it for a couple of weeks. But then something unlocked in my head and I got it and stayed with it and rose through the program and eventually got to study with teachers who had more of a Cunningham base to their technical style. We had many guest artists who came in with that background. One in particular is a woman who didn't dance with Merce, but she danced with Viola Farber. Her name is June Finch. She was an incredible teacher and choreographer, and she was someone who definitely had a huge impact on who I am as a dancer and as a choreographer because of her musicality and her use of the technique in order to create lots of context without necessarily relating narrative, if that makes any sense. And so the cool thing about the program was that we had professional dancers teaching us. So therefore, if a company came in and landed at the Auditorium Theater, we were able to get them in and they would teach a master class. We had Graham technique with Thea Narissa Barnes. We had people who danced with Bella Lewitsky come and teach. We had people who had danced with Dan Wagner. So that was Paul Taylor's approach to modern dance. There were so many things that we got, so many gifts that we received. We had Linda Davis, we had Clay Taliaferro. It was just an incredible training that we got through the guest artist series, through the opportunity of having dancers flow through Chicago and become part of the Chicago dance family, as June likes to call it. So yeah, and so all of that is pretty much classic. All the people who I learned from developed their techniques roughly, approximately between 1920 and 1965. And so, yeah.
All right. So that's like a very classic look at modern dance. So, I mean, I'm getting the feeling you were working in the style of modern dance. Now, how did you take that information and relate that to musical theater? How did you make that bridge to take that information that they were having and bridging it into what musical theater requirements would be?
Well, part of it happened by way of Shirley herself. She was asked by the Department of Theater at Columbia College, that was under the direction of Sheldon Patinkin at the time, to choreograph a musical. And
Mm-hmm.
she was going to have the company dance as the dancers in the musical. And my friend Lori and I got very excited about this because we saw it was our opportunity to become Carol Burnett dancers. Because when you grew up in the 1960s and 70s, that was dancing. That and solid gold, or as Lori used to like to call it, solid mold.
Right.
But anyways, I'm sorry for those of who like people like that.
No, no,
But
no, no, no.
be it as it were. So we were really excited about the prospect of being able to be up on stage in tap shoes, wearing tuxedos, wearing things with sequins on them. We both got very excited about this. We both had a great audition. And because we were also involved in many things that had to do with the concert world, we were both declined for the production, which is okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I got my toes very wet in that. And I said, once that happened, I didn't want to come out of that world. And I wanted to get back to it as quickly as I possibly could. And I felt that it wasn't so much the training that I was getting in technique, although that does help. Um, but it was the training that I was receiving in dance composition, improvisation, uh, and the
Okay.
like that was going to give me a foundation to become someone who could work in uh,
Mm-hmm.
in musical theater as a choreographer. And
Mm-hmm.
I could not have been more wrong. It took a good long while to get there. It took, I'd say, easily about 5 years. And during those 5 years, I had to and did love it, of course, came to love it very much. I studied jazz and I studied tap. I took tap very seriously for the first time because my only tap classes in college were by way
Mm-hmm.
of one of the company members who hadn't studied much tap. And the
Mm-hmm.
one artist who was also on faculty at Lou Conti's studio, who taught tap for Columbia, he somehow disappeared. I'm not quite sure why. And because we were young and somewhat silly at the time, I have to say, we didn't understand why teachers don't come back. It's because
Mm-hmm.
they have other jobs. It's because there's no more funding to pay them. There's a variety of reasons. So
Mm-hmm.
whatever reason it was that Bob Wells did not come back to teach again while I was at Columbia College, I regretted it. But you know, at that time it was surrounding a bunch of drama and murkiness, and it was probably something that was very simple that kept him from returning. So eventually I did get that training. I got it at dance studios that were on the perimeter of Chicago, and I'm very grateful that I did get that training
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because that helped diversify my vocabulary so I
Right.
could do work in musical theater.
Okay. Yeah. Well, in musical theater, I mean, certainly the one of the main aspects is that it's storytelling. People are
Yeah,
characters, and when you're dancing a character. You're not dancing an abstract idea, or you're not just the body moving in space. And I know some of the more
right.
traditional modern dance choreographies might go towards that, like Jose Lamon's
Hmm.
Morris Pavan, you know, things like that.
Hmm.
So I'm going to cue up something right now and show this. This is something that the
Okay.
American Dance Machine had reconstructed back in the probably 1981, I think it was. But this was from the show Finian's Rainbow, and this is a very, very modern dance looking piece that was actually choreographed by Michael Kidd, who was ballet and also musical theater at the same time. But obviously, he was schooled in this. So I'm going to bring this up, and maybe if you want to say anything over it, go right ahead. Otherwise, we'll watch a little
Sure.
clip of this. But this is a
Sure.
good
Sure.
example of one moment, because I have a couple of clicks to do here. Okay. And this is actually Janet Elber from the Martha Graham Dance Company who's dancing this. So this is from Finian's Rainbow.
Mm.
Okay.
Whew.
Yeah. I had only intended to show a little bit of that, but it's hard to shut it off. You know, it's a beautiful,
No,
beautiful dance.
it's rapturous. It
Mm-hmm.
is fantastic to see her in motion, and
Mm-hmm.
it's making me call back to a lot of things that were I didn't address in the first question by seeing her use a lower center of gravity and seeing her travel through space. Those are things that I think were aspects of dancing that I know attracted me or made me attractive to the choreographers that I've been fortunate
Mm-hmm.
enough to work with in musical theater as a performer. And
Mm-hmm.
also, they are things that are going to come back to that you're going to ask a little bit later, but they are things that I
Mm-hmm.
look for in dancers. Someone who can have a low center of gravity, a very organic response to movement, an interest in letting the movement tell the story so that you're not selling with your face, but letting the movement
Mm-hmm.
relate whatever the emotional impetuses that are driving that movement, letting that shine through, letting the movement bring the context out rather than
Mm-hmm.
playing it on your face.
Mm-hmm.
Those are
Mm-hmm.
definitely
Yeah.
things I look for. And the face will happen naturally. It'll happen as part of the process. It doesn't have to be the beginning.
Right, right. So, I mean, so that's an excellent point to bring out. So, I'm glad you said that because in traditional musical theater, you usually some sort of a hard sell. There's a very strong
Mm-hmm.
facial look. There's a very strong connection to the audience and pulling out. And this was much more introspective. And her character, she's actually mute. She can't speak. She has to speak with her
Right.
body. So,
Sure.
finding that modern dance aspect certainly would have worked better than if she would have been doing something much more open and flamboyant in terms of her movements. So
Absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. So that was some of the classic values of modern dance that worked in
Mm-hmm.
a storytelling format for
Very
musical
much
theater.
so.
And I guess so that was, I mean, that was a trend way back there in the 40s into the 1950s of bringing these choreographers in from concert dance. So you had mentioned to me a little bit early about Hanya Holm, and you provided a little
Yes.
bit of her. Do you want to talk a little bit about what Hanya Holm did on Broadway?
Well, sure. I find her journey to Broadway is a very interesting one by way of Germany and working with Mary Wigman, training
Mm-hmm.
in that school of dance and coming with this really rich, in depth background in Laban that she had as a result of training with Wigman. And
Mm-hmm.
oh boy, I'm gonna get shot if this is wrong information, but I think that the first thing she did for Broadway actually was a staging of a piece that Kurt Weill wrote called The Eternal Road. And it was a very theatrical piece, opera, cantata type thing. And so her actual getting into musical theater came with Kiss Me Kate, which was 1947. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, I'm going to do it again. I have to correct myself. There was another show that she worked on where she created one of the vignettes, kind of like Contact for Susan Stroman. It was called Ballet
Mm-hmm.
Ballads. And she was one of the
Oh, okay.
choreographers involved in that. Yeah, and so now here comes My Fair Lady. I'm not sorry, I'm looking at My Fair Lady, but here comes Kiss Me Kate with all of these
Mm-hmm.
incredible opportunities for movement and different types of movement, jitterbug, ballet, court dancing, tap dancing, you name it, it's
Mm-hmm.
all in there. And here's this woman with this opportunity to do this work. And while she did by her own admission not possess the vocabulary to do the work, she would ask the dancers, what is this person? What are they doing? How are they in this scene right now? What is propelling them to get into this dance after they sang this song? Particularly in the case of working with Harold Lang and shaping his solo for Bianca. She did that work with him, and it
Mm-hmm.
made for very true and very valid work, and a very different concept for working out dances in the show. Um,
Mm-hmm.
quite it's supportive, not like the way that DeMille says to work in the musical theater world, where you basically are supposed to walk in knowing at least 64 counts of what it is that you want to do, and don't
Mm-hmm.
have dancers standing around. Don't let producers and directors start to tap their fingers on their coffee cups and smoke too many cigarettes in your rehearsal. That's the 1940s.
Mm-hmm.
We'd never do that now. But yeah, it's like to be able to work in a collaborative way with a performer and shape the work that way is much different, but still supportive of what it is that eventually is a thing about musical theater. You are very product oriented. And so therefore you have to always keep the product in mind. But to shine light on the process is also
Mm-hmm.
something that's very unique when you have a modern dance person come in, because you're
Mm-hmm.
always talking about the
Okay.
who, the what, the where, the why. Yeah.
Right.
And so she
Right.
definitely did that with that show, because Harold Lang talks about it in that documentary that you're going to show a clip from. And she most likely did it with My Fair Lady. And
Mm-hmm.
I will probably, while you're showing the clip, I will probably turn around and grab a book to make sure that she was also the one who choreographed the dances for Camelot.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean it's a great point, because even in classic musical theater, there were modern dance choreographers who were creating the movement. So even though they weren't doing maybe what they did on the concert stage, they were still bringing their modern dance values into how musical theater was choreographed. So we think
Definitely.
of musical theater maybe as one sort of look, but there's a lot of different ways that those initial choreographies for shows back in that time period were put
True.
together, and they were shaped by the modern dance sentiment. Now we're going
Hmm.
to go on a little bit from here, in
Okay.
that, I mean, because that was more historical in those times, and if somebody's doing a revival of those shows, they can choose to work in that way, or they can choose maybe to address it in something much more of today's way of thinking. So we're
Hmm.
going to show a little bit of a recent production of Oklahoma on Broadway, which had a very different rethinking and staging. And we all know the Agnes DeMille Dream Ballet, which is so
Hmm.
iconic. And yet this was now cut down. Choreographer John Higginbotham, and danced by one dancer named is Gabrielle Hamilton. And in a very contemporary, and in a way, we could say it's drawing out of the modern dance tradition. So I just want to flip
Hmm.
a little bit of her on. She's got something on her Instagram page. So let's watch a little bit of Gabrielle Hamilton. Now, this is Oklahoma. This is quite a different look on Oklahoma Dream Ballet that we normally would think of. Okay. So, from looking at that, is there anything that you would see in there? Do you say here's an aspect of traditional modern dance that's still being seen, even though we're going into a more contemporary form?
Well, definitely the one thing that is a carryover from carry I'm going to go backwards. I'm going to leapfrog back. We carry back
Okay.
to the restaging of the solo from Finian's Rainbow. that was danced originally by Anita Alvarez and choreographed by Michael Kidd. Then spring
Mm-hmm.
back even another 25, 30 years to Isadora Duncan and her having an orchestra play Beethoven's Seventh and dancing from start to finish, whatever it was that
Mm-hmm.
she felt that she was going to convey by having that music on in that reality with
Mm-hmm.
whatever she was wearing at that time and confronting the audience with those ideas. I think that the work that was done on Gabrielle Hamilton owes a definite debt to the work that Isadora Duncan did back in the 1910s and
Wow.
1920s.
Wow. Wow. That's a strong statement. Good. Um, Now, what do you
Yeah.
think? What do you think in terms of that idea, though? I mean, in terms of choreography, if you
Hmm.
can conceptualize it rather than talk about what the dancer is actually executing, but in terms of a modern dance choreographic thought process, is there something unique in that that a choreographer is going to bring to a musical theater production, as
Well,
opposed to
the
if you
one
bring it? Go ahead.
Well, the one thing that's very interesting is that when I learned how to choreograph, I learned how to choreograph by way of the modalities that were used and taught by people who had studied with Martha Graham. They learned from Louis
Hmm.
Horst, and choreography was very much wedded to musical structure. So you were
Hmm.
given a song, for example, and your movement theme depicted visually that song's motive or that song's
Hmm.
verse. And then you had another movement that signified the chorus, and that was the chorus. So that
Hmm.
was like one way of learning how to create a dance was by mirroring the composition of a song. And it wasn't a song like, say, oh, well, I don't know why this one just came to mind, Yankee Doodle Dandy, but it was like a song like Who is Sylvia or Where'er You Walk by Handel. It was some
Hmm.
type of thing that people would know that had a very classical, that was very classical in its origin.
Hmm.
And I feel that there is the use of repetition is is not that type of repetition in the work that they did in the Oklahoma piece. It's more like one movement is repeated a lot, and then it
Hmm.
makes an impetus to spring into the next movement. And then
Hmm.
there's in that repetition is like a sort of a winding up the spring so it can uncoil and release and go into something
Hmm.
else.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Hmm.
that's how I feel like they're doing that, and that too would be another mode because there's other things that we did when we learned composition. We learned how to compose dances in the sonata allegro form, but we also learned how, as best as we could, to choreograph in a rondo form or to choreograph in a theme and transformation form as well, where you
Hmm.
had something and it had to basically not look like what it was when you had started. And I think that
Hmm.
that's also something that's inherent in that work that we just saw
Hmm.
from Oklahoma, you know.
Hmm.
And I can understand. I mean, especially when you're expecting, I can understand why that production of Oklahoma rocked people's world in so many ways. I can totally understand it. And
Hmm.
it's like and they say, well, when you're gonna do that, just do another show, do your own show. And it's like, yeah, you could do that, but you can also have this experience. I think the thing for me, and this may be going off theme, but I think the thing for me is to find a way of bringing the best of both worlds together. Something that is going to be marketable, something that is going to spark discussion, not controversy,
Hmm.
but discussion.
Hmm.
And then we can get there.
Hmm.
Because I mean, think of how it was, and you were around for this. Any of us who made theater back in the 80s were around for this when people said, how novel would it be and how thrifty would it be to have our Lori and our Curly be in the ballet be the same people who are playing Lori and Curly?
Hmm.
We'll save money and people couldn't handle that
Right.
for a good 15, 20 years. And then some of them
Right.
even tried, okay, how about just the three of them doing it?
Hmm.
And no
Hmm.
no ensemble of dancers. People couldn't handle that for another 15 or 20 years. Then Darren
Hmm.
Aronofsky hung the plot of Black Swan on that. So,
Hmm.
you know,
Right. Right. Yeah. So I mean, there's a new way of thinking, and people want to interpret things in a different way of thinking, and
yeah,
not be so reliant on what was on the past. And I have to redo what was in the past. I want a total reconception, and that's going to involve new
right,
dance styles. It's not going to involve
right.
pulling from the traditional musical theater, B plus hips out sort of thing.
Yeah.
So. You know, that's where I
Yeah,
think we're going to
yeah.
see a lot more of that.
It's
So in
very
term, in,
tempting to. Hmm?
I'm sorry, go ahead, and I'll come in
I was going to
after
say
that.
it's very tempting in musical theater to want to try to find the ways that will make the choreography more organic, if you will. Like in the
Hmm.
case of West Side Story, to make it look like it truly is dances that teens did in the 1960s. Or if you're
Hmm.
taking the show and modernizing it, what they're doing now. But there are
Hmm.
two things to always keep in mind, which is why I say I think that revival should spark discussion and not controversy. There's the music that was written for the show, which is very much wedded to its thing. Um, and
Hmm.
it's like even if you don't have a 34-piece orchestra playing it, even if you have an ensemble that might be also more organic, like this revival for
Hmm.
Oklahoma, where it was basically a couple of guitars and a violin, that's cool. But it's like it's still those melodies and it's still those harmonies. And
Hmm.
you can take them and contextualize the arranging of the tunes, but when you start to rewrite tunes, I think that people get really ugly about that, and that's what
Hmm.
makes controversy. So,
Hmm.
and I think
Hmm.
it happens with the movement. It's like they want to sexualize these pieces, and I'm like, well, you got to remember you got that music that you have to deal with, so you have to figure out how to do it. You just can't say,
Hmm.
okay, I'm going to put bumping pelvises and bumping uglies on stage in Louise's
Hmm.
Dream Ballet and Carousel. You can't do that. You have to figure
Hmm.
out how to do it. You know?
Hmm. Hmm. So, all right, let's go into training. I mean, you know, you're a
Okay.
professor, you're teaching classes. So, is there anything unusual or particular to you that you will use when you're working with a group of students in your classes? Particular techniques or particular concepts? Is there something that comes out of your modern dance thought process that you really want to use in your class for your students?
Well, this is a very challenging thing, and it always seems to be the same challenge semester in, semester out. The bulk of the students come in with no knowledge of what modern dance is, where it
Mm-hmm.
came from. They have an idea of what lyrical is, and lyrical and
Mm-hmm.
modern are really not the same animal. And so to basically say, let's take ideas and look at them in terms of time, space, shape, and energy as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
emotion
Mm-hmm.
and mood and nuance. That is something that
Mm-hmm.
comes in performance. Let's look at this in these simple terms, and that
Mm-hmm.
is a very befuddling thing. Just like me learning to walk backwards back in 1982.
Right.
It's just as
Mm-hmm.
hard
Mm-hmm.
to take it and pare it down like that. So you have to be aware of that. I have to be aware of that every semester I walk into that studio and teach that class. Um, that's where I'm starting. And I also want to keep it interesting. And I also have to take into consideration that I've got studio trained dancers who have been in a certain environment and using their bodies in a certain way and are only accustomed to moving one way, and how to turn them onto this. They don't have to jump ship and become the next modern dancer out there. They just have to
Mm-hmm.
just open their minds to the idea of moving this way. And then people who have never ever danced before, ever, not once, and their joint connections have solidified or starting to solidify, and their bodies are definitely adulting, and they have to take this idea of getting their muscles to
Mm-hmm.
elongate in these ways into consideration, and
Mm-hmm.
then making it return. Because here's another problem, and I wouldn't say this is a challenge, it's a problem. The program was written to incorporate X amount of hours of dance and X amount of hours, all the many things that a person has to study in order to be ready for the musical theater stage. And once they get to a certain year in our program, they begin to study what is known as musical theater dance. And the idea is to somehow keep them working within these modalities, so they never, unless they go back and take the beginning level tab class that is constructed in our program, get another chance to take a tab class per se as a tab class, or a modern class as a modern class. So it is challenge slash problem to keep saying, okay, it's time to get reacquainted. Put on your black tights and take off your shoes and your socks and
Mm-hmm.
let's do it. Because we're gonna roll in the floor, we're gonna pretzel our
Mm-hmm.
hearts out, we're gonna graham slide and contract and breathe and
Mm-hmm.
star and press and dab and flick and float and glide, and we're going to do all that for 8 weeks, and we're going to do that every other 8 weeks just so you never ever lose sight of it. And when you get to your movement for the actor class, just think of how far ahead you'll be of everybody else. Yeah, that's the only way that I'd say there's a payoff academically if you just keep reacquainting yourself with these modalities. So that's one thing. Many.
Yeah. So, I mean, students obviously have a lot to learn when they're coming in. And I'm sure a lot of professors would agree with this, that students have a little bit of a tunnel vision when they're coming in from their high school dance studios and not knowing as to what is out there. And what you're saying is, I need to educate you first in what the possibilities are before we could try to attempt those possibilities. And so probably a lot of just showing of videos and talking about different things and getting them to say, all right, let's take this chance. Let's try something different that isn't like, you know, my competition dance solo that I worked on for an entire year. And to make that work. So if you had something that you would want to say to all of those dance teachers who have dance studios, who are training their kids and then sending them off to college, is there anything that you would want to ask them to do or broaden or just give them advice on, this is going to help your kids in the future when they go on?
All right. There's many things that I could do, but I think they all come down to one thing in particular. So we'll synthesize. And these are through experience. One time, not too long ago, I went to a dance teacher summit, and they had a variety of teachers there. And one of the teachers that was there was Gus Solomons Jr., who had danced for many years with Merce Cunningham. And I took his class. And mind you, they stuck him in this really weird space with carpet on the floor, and he was wearing jazz shoes so he wouldn't, like, you know, mess his feet up too much. But the class was wonderful. It was so much fun. And I was just like going, God, this was a real treat. I looked around the room, though, and there were not a lot of people there between the ages of 12 and 20 who should have maybe been getting turned on to this. And I think that some studios probably would behoove themselves when they're in these environments and they have these artists at these dance conventions like this, take them to a class and let them learn, and not sit and stare and watch and observe and be able to do these, oh, they're only doing singles. No, do the class and figure out or find out why they're asking for just one turn, or ask why they're just asking for a leg that only goes to 45 degrees. Why are they asking for this? There's a reason. And then if you don't find it, you took a good class, you had a good time, you busted a nice little sweat, go have some Starbucks and go on to the next thing, whatever the case may be. But, you know, it's like, find whatever was positive. And if you cannot find anything, whatever, maybe it'll hit you in the head 10 years from the day you took it. That's one thing. I think the other thing is that there needs to be discussion of that history, and it can't be, I don't know, it can't be lensed in what we accept as dancers nowadays. Because I've taught too many dance history classes where I put on a video of, say, like Stormy Weather with the Catherine Dunham dance troupe in there. And it's like some of the girls' noses turn up and they go, they're so fat. And I'm like, okay, let's stop that right now. Okay, let's cut that the hell out. And then we have to just get that untangled. So there has to be a certain openness when this information is introduced, and then also so that is not a shock to these young girls and maybe the errant young boy who learns how to yank their leg up to their face and do 7 pirouettes when someone at a dance program takes them and says, okay, you're taking beginning level modern dance, and they freak out. It's like, well, you've got to learn how to move this way. You can't start at the advanced level class. And you can't look at the advanced level dancers with contempt and be like, well, I can dance better than that. It's like, that's not the point. There's something that needs to be taken care of. So I think that there also needs to be education on that, like how these dance programs are constructed, how they fit inside a university setting, especially if it's a state university, because more often than not, like ours, this is a liberal arts research one environment. And so there is a lot of emphasis put on critical thinking and discussion and finding out about the history and making yourself curious about what that's all about. And I think the last thing that I want to say is that just in the matter of efficiency, the history of dance tends to dovetail into discussions, and you keep learning about like the same 17 people over and over again, no matter who's
Mm-hmm.
teaching it. So it seems no matter what textbook you get. So as an educator, I have to constantly keep shoving that aside and saying, you're going to hear their names a lot. You need to know who they are, but I'd like to show you this, and then we're going to reflect on how the two bounce off of one another. Case in point, whenever I get to a certain place in the discussion of the development of modern dance, and we start talking about Denishon and maybe like Ted Shawn and Ruth St. Dennis Diverging and the creation of Jacob's
Mm-hmm.
Pillow, I like to put in the documentary Free to Dance, which was
Mm-hmm.
produced for PBS, so that
Sure.
students can learn about Edna Guy and Helmsley Winfield and Pearl Primus doing her modern work
Mm-hmm.
before she started doing the work that was informed by Pan-African dancing. Catherine Dunham, listening to Catherine
Mm-hmm.
Dunham tell her stories about how she went to the Rosenwald Foundation and asked for money and was told, you're not going to Africa, you're going to go here. It's safer for a little woman to go to this part of the world alone with her camera than it is to go over there. So you're going to go
Mm-hmm.
here. All those stories that are very important and also huge building blocks in the construction of modern dance, particularly from where I sit, because Catherine Dunham was an artist in residence at SIU Carbondale for like 6 or 7 years in the 1960s. So yeah, I the stories need to be informed, and you don't always get that information like you should get it,
Mm-hmm.
and through the books that were given to use to teach
Mm-hmm.
modern dance or to teach the history of modern dance, I should say. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so those.
You've frozen on us, Daryl. We're hoping this is going to come back. All right. Let's see if you can still. Oh, here you go. Now you're back. We
Okay,
lost you. We
okay.
lost you for a second there, but you're okay. All
Oh,
right.
I was at my most impassioned.
um, I'm going to ask you one more question, but I want to send
Okay.
something out because there are people who are watching. Now, if you're watching, you have a question, put it right in the comments and we'll pull it up there and Daryl will give his answer to the question. So anything that you might want to know from him, a specific question on a certain thing, put that in the comments and
I
we'll
will
get
do
that
my
in
level
there.
best.
Yeah. Now, kind of going off of what you said, I mean, we're talking about in terms of what you do, your
Yep.
very vast knowledge of modern dance and how you're relating that to musical theater. It's extremely valuable information. You want to teach young people this, and they come in and they're very severely limited in terms of what their range of interest is, what their previous training is. So is the solution some other sort of program that would be targeted towards that age? Like, would you be interested in teaching on some of these dance conventions across the country and in trying to reach kids at a younger age? Or is it just something that no,
You're
they really need to?
frozen. Read
Oh,
my lips. You're okay.
okay. Yeah.
Okay, you
Well,
froze
how,
up. So is there some other program? If you could go back and just repeat your thought from, is there some other program? 'Cause that's what I didn't get.
no, would you be interested in doing some sort of working your own program where you would be working with more of the high school age dancer? Would you want to go out on these dance conventions saying, I'm the person to bring you information on modern dance and musical theater and from this thing that you don't know anything about, but is so important. And I'm going to teach you now and not wait until you're a
Oh, yes, I would. And I would like to be able to get them used to to this vocabulary and the relating of the information in this way,
freshman.
because there will be other people who are a little older than me and they're steeped in a different type of tradition than I am, and they're not so much a hybrid as I am. They're much more purist in their approach to whatever it is they're bringing for modern dance. Yet,
Hmm.
yes, they need to be able to hear this information from people like that. And
Okay, you've frozen up too. So it looks like our connection is kind
oh,
of wavering. Oh, there you go. Now
yeah.
you're back. All right, let's give this one more moment. In the meantime, waiting for come back, we have a lot of people who are watching from all over. We have Brazil is in the house today. We have France is in the house today. We have another France that's in the house today. Um, we have comments coming in about Catherine Dunham. And there we go. Okay. All
Okay.
right. All right. Well, it looks like our connection is not the greatest right now, so maybe we'll just wrap this up a little bit. Um,
Yeah.
is is there any other information that you might have, Daryl, that you think is important that maybe we haven't covered yet, or is your just main idea is using these great concepts of modern dance and applying them towards a musical theater program?
Yes, yes, do all that. Stay open, be open to the possibility of doing it. When I taught at
Mm-hmm.
Missouri State, which was a combined theater dance program, I was always encouraging our students who were majoring in largely modern dance to audition for the musical,
Mm-hmm.
audition for the summer stock program that's on campus. Do it. It's not going to kill you. Do it in
Mm-hmm.
your community when you go back home for the summer. Find out who's doing a musical that's very dancey, because a lot of park districts and summer theaters still do those things and still need dancers, and be
Mm-hmm.
in one. Keep yourself open to the possibility of doing that, because you never can tell where you're going to be in your professional life, where it's going to come in handy, especially if it's more for women than it is for men. You find yourself in a situation where there is a school that is either private or connected to some decent resources, financial resources, and they need someone like you to be that
Mm-hmm.
person who can choreograph that musical. And you do need to be conversant in that, and you can use your
Mm-hmm.
uh, skills that you learned as a choreographer in concert dance to relate in musical theater. It can be done. As a matter of fact, the great thing about coming from that background is that you're not impeded by an audience's expectations. You can be like Gabrielle Hamilton's choreographer, whose name escapes me right now. You can just tilt the world on its ear, because you don't come in knowing that people expect this of this show. Or if you do
Mm-hmm.
your research and you want to take that style on, assimilate that style, and relate it in terms of your way of teaching dance, which is somatically informed um, to a certain extent, use that information. Do
Mm-hmm.
not do not cut yourself off from it just because it is this.
Mm-hmm.
It does not matter. It is definitely a way that, as a choreographer, you can count on making a stipend that will feed you. I want to say that that is probably the reason why we don't have more instances of, say, someone like Alvin Ailey doing musicals, is because he may have performed in them in the 50s, and I'm sure he was in House of Flowers,
Mm-hmm.
and he may have choreographed some that didn't see a lot of success. And he even acted in shows that only played like 20, 30 performances. But that gave him his nest egg so he could do things like choreograph for a group of people and create the
Mm-hmm.
iconic works that identify his company, like Revelations.
Mm-hmm.
It's a no-brainer.
Mm-hmm.
It makes such sense to me. And I really
Right.
just could, I never understood why more people didn't fall down that rabbit hole with me. But yes,
Mm-hmm.
that is what you
Mm-hmm.
can do. And it is very much appreciated. And yet, like I said earlier, it does take a minute to get there, because you have to have some inkling of what jazz is all about. But,
Mm-hmm.
and you do have to have some inkling of what tap is all about. But
Mm-hmm.
you can do wonderful things if you have your
Mm-hmm.
handle on that vocabulary.
Right, right. Okay. All right, Daryl. So I think that's good. We're going to wrap it up here, but thank you for stopping in, for benefiting us with your wisdom and your
I feel
ideas
so
on modern
appreciated.
dance. Yeah, absolutely. And it's fairly unique, because we always think of musical theater as jazz and tap and ballet and really snazzy type of routines. And this
Yeah.
is something that's a part of musical theater, but it's not in the forefront, so we don't think of it first. But yet
Mm-mm, no.
there's opportunity, and there is skill that's developed in people who work this way, that you can
Yes.
branch out into many other areas and be very successful. So it's like it's solid experience. It's solid
Oh yes, and
experience.
there's history, and all you have to do is crack open a book and read about all these occurrences where someone who was rooted within this world came up, rose up, did wonderful things in it, and then kept jumping between the two worlds, or maybe became a director or started making films like Joanne Fregoletti Jensen. I could go on for days. Trust me. It's like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the phrase we'll end on. Crack open a book.
Okay.
All right. You know, for
right.
everybody, crack open a book. Don't just sit there and Google and do your internet search. Read more in depth. Find out what really made people tick, who were real artists, and just use that for yourself for the future. And then all of a sudden you'll be on the right track. Okay.
So
all right.
much so.
Darryl, thank you again. I'm going to take you out for a second, but hang in there and we'll talk for a moment afterwards. And thank you for stopping in today. I appreciate it. Okay. All right. Great interview. Very good. Great information. That was Darryl Clark. He's an assistant professor of dance at the Southern Illinois University. And sort of his little thing that he works in, he's very strong training in modern dance, that he is applying those concepts to musical theater dance. And it's kind of not what we normally see, but as you can see from everything he said today, there's very definitely a link, and there's very definitely a need to have those concepts even within the field of musical theater. So all of you who are interested in that, please look up a lot of the great people that she mentioned and or that he mentioned, and then talk about how to read more in depth about that information and to get that in your bones so that you will be more prepared when you want to go out for your future. Okay. So thank you again. My name is Bob Boross. This is my Jazz and Tap Dance Life. If you like this information, course number 1, please subscribe so you'll find out what we're doing. Actually, next week I have a great interview with another professor, Kim Vaccaro, who's going to talk about Vera Dane, who is somebody who wrote about jazz dance in the 1930s and 40s and really worked with the vernacular. So that's going to be a great interview. That's next week on Thursday at 4 p.m. And also click the notifications bell, okay? So thank you for stopping in. We appreciate that, and we'll see you in the next video.